Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1998 crime drama film American History X. Now, American History X is a film that, when I first saw it on cable, I thought it was a very captivating and gripping movie, but due to the subject matter and to the heavy nature of the film, I really didn't have a desire to watch it again. And it was still admittedly a pretty hard watch for me after all these years, not because it was a bad film, but because of that subject matter again. It's a film that is not only pretty intense in a multitude of different ways, but it's also a movie that is genuinely depressing to watch, but that's the reality of it. Like, that's the reality of a lot of the themes and a lot of the subtext of this movie. But it is definitely a film that, let's just say, it leaves a mark. And it's a movie that after it's over, you're just kind of sitting there and just trying to deal with all of the emotions and everything that the film is throwing at you, and it's a lot of heavy shit. But before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, I want to give a special shout out to Alexander for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, American History X is directed by Tony Kaye, and this is his first film. And prior to this, he was a very popular, very critically acclaimed commercial director. So he had a lot of experience working with a camera, but in a different way. And I think that is definitely a big part of why he wasn't really able to effectively bring his vision to the screen, and why somebody like Edward Norton was able to take over the film and kind of upstage him in that regard. But it's also a reason why the visual aspects of this film are as impressive as they ultimately are. Like, this is a really well directed film for the most part. I think the framing is pretty solid. Uh, there are some moments where I think he has too many extreme close ups that take away from the effectiveness of certain dialogue scenes and the strength of the actors in those sequences, because you don't really see their full performance. You only see part of it, but that's not something that's really that common throughout the film when it comes to the framing of the movie. And I also feel that the film features some genuinely a good and dynamic differing kinds of camera angles and different types of techniques that Kay employs throughout it when it comes to pans, zooms, and so on and so forth. And I think in particular, he really is able to utilize slow mo in a way that is really effective, that adds to a certain scene and isn't something that's just there for a distraction or there for show. For instance, when Derek uh, curb stomps the African American man who was trying to break into his house, and even after that, when he's getting arrested and he's smiling while he's getting arrested with his arms outstretched, like, the way that the slow-mo is used in that scene makes that sequence all the more powerful. The same thing goes for scenes like during the I don't think it was a supermarket, might have been, or I think it's just a market, like a neighborhood market. So the market sequence where the clerk, who is also African American, gets milk poured all over her face by the neo Nazis. the way that that scene is shot with the slow motion, that sequence is all the more effective and all the more visually arresting because of the slow motion. This is also the case when it comes to the death of Danny at the end of the movie. So it's definitely a film directing wise that features quite amount of sequences where Kaye really brings it, where he really delivers a really strong effort. And it's even in scenes like the basketball scene. Like he easily could have shot that in a very lackadaisical, very low effort kind of way, but he shot it with a lot of energy, a lot of kineticism that really did match the overall energy of a spirited basketball game. So yeah, it's a film from a visual perspective that is really strong. But when it comes to some of the other aspects of directing, not so much. Because there's more to do with directing than just setting up your shots in a good fashion. There's more to directing a film than just that. And a lot of it is finding a way to get your cohesive vision on the screen and getting your actors involved with it or other people involved with the production and buying in. And according to people who worked on the set of the film and according to other people who were involved with the movie, Kaye just didn't have that down. So Kaye, he will look at what happened with this film and try to disown it, try to take his name off of it, and try to distance himself from it because of what happened with Edward Norton taking over the film and doing his own cut in the studio and their pushback with him. But I think a lot of it is honestly really due to him. If he was better at getting his vision on the screen in a way that people were able to buy into as a whole, then he wouldn't have to worry about Edward Norton stepping in. He wouldn't have to worry about the studio. And the fact is, he wasn't really able to do that. Like there are actual recollections from people who worked on the set who were saying things like, I don't know how this film turned out as good as it did. I don't know how it looks as good as it does because Kaye was totally out of his element. He was just not really showcasing the things that you want to see from a director that let you know that this guy is the right guy for the job. That this is the guy who should be captaining the ship. So I think that's the reason why the film at points can have some moments where the strength of the entirety of it is not necessarily as strong as it could be because I think there wasn't really a strong cohesive vision from the director. It had to come from somebody else, namely Edward Norton. Now, the film is written by David McKenna, and David McKenna, from what I've read, he based a lot of the events in this script based on things that he actually experienced in his own life. And that personal connection to things is definitely something that you can feel throughout this screenplay and throughout this film. And it takes an orthodox and interesting approach to storytelling. It's non-linear. And I understand why some people would prefer it to be a more linear story, but the non-linear approach is a big reason why American History X, in my opinion, stands out from other crime dramas because it's more unique in that way. The non-linear structure also ties into the whole narration of the movie, which I thought was really clever, where the narration in the film is Danny reading his essay, American History X. And I genuinely feel that's a really cool framing device. That's a really interesting way to set things up when it comes to the overall film and the story. And I also feel with the aesthetic approach, which is to have a fair amount of black and white sequences for the flashbacks, I don't really feel that that would be as good and would honestly work as well as it does if it was just all black and white flashbacks for like the first 30 minutes and then flashing forward to the current timeline when Derek gets out of prison and is trying to find a way to get Danny out of the grip of the neo-Nazis, because it would just feel like things are just kind of loosely patched together. It just would have felt like it was more of a gimmick than anything in terms of the black and white, and I don't think it would be as good. I really don't. Now, the story focuses on two brothers, Danny and Derek Vineyard. And Danny Vineyard is still in high school, and he is trying to emulate his brother, who is a neo-Nazi. And Derek went to prison for murdering a black man by curb stomping him to death. And he gets out of prison, and his whole goal is not to go back to his neo-Nazi ways and just start where he left off. No, his whole goal is to continue to rehabilitate himself and his brother, as well as other people in his family, and try to distance himself as much as he can from the neo-Nazis. But his brother isn't aware of that at first. He just thinks that his brother is just going to be into the same things. And so he decided to write a paper for his school to impress his brother, and also due to some influence by this father figure in his life, and this manipulative individual in Cameron Alexander, who is the head of the neo Nazis. And he writes a paper about Hitler and about Mein Kampf. And that catches the attention of the teacher and then ultimately the principal. And this school therapist and Dr. Bob Sweeney, who decides to enroll Danny in his own class called American History X, because he believes in him. He sees that he's a young kid who's just on the wrong path, who is just being disillusioned and doesn't really know any better. He's being led astray. So he doesn't see him as somebody who is hopeless. So he's not going to expel him. He's not going to do these other things that other people might have done in that situation. Instead, he decides to make a deal with him and enroll him in his own class, American History X, where he will give him assignments and teach him different sort of things his way. And his first assignment is for Danny to write an essay about his brother, Derek. Because Bob used to be a mentor of Derek's. He used to be a part of Derek's life. He used to be one of Derek's teachers. So he sees a lot of Derek and Derek's potential in Danny. And so he doesn't want to let that go to waste. And Danny even decides to title his essay American History X. And initially, the essay starts to go one way, but then he starts to see that his brother Derek has genuinely started to change his ways. And so that makes him think back on why and how he wound up a part of this neo-Nazi group and why he is the way that he is right now. and that leads him to having revelations and moments where he genuinely starts to feel remorse, starts to feel bad. He starts to see the veil being lifted. He starts to see through all the bullshit, just like his brother did. And you see that through these flashbacks. It starts out with the basketball game where the whites win over the blacks and forced them off the playground, and it's set up in this triumphant fashion, complete with a triumphant score accompanying it. And Danny's talking about how Venice Beach, where they're at, used to be this great place, but then all the gangs came in and then made everything difficult and dangerous and troublesome. And you start to really get inside of Danny's head. And then through Danny's recollections of the past, you see uh, Derek's past. You see why Derek became this neo-Nazi figure. You see the beginnings of that. You see him ranting at the news after his father was killed. You see a conversation between him and his father at the dinner table where his father is ranting about DEI and all this other stuff and drops the N-word. And it further solidifies the point that in a lot of instances, racism is a cycle. People are born into it. And this is just one of those instances. And it shows that Derek wasn't just an evil guy from the start, that he was just led down this path. And it shows the beginnings of that path with the conversation with his father, and then what happens to his father, and who was ultimately responsible for his father's death, and then him being further manipulated by this other now new father figure in his life, and Cameron, and he's lost at this point. He's looking for a reason. He's looking for something to really turn his world back upright, because it's been turned upside down. And he finds that in this group of neo-Nazis. And they start to placate to his ego. And he gets a lot out of that. And he starts spewing a lot of this hateful rhetoric and becomes this ringleader of these neo-Nazis and sets up all these attacks. And ultimately, it leads to him going to prison because he curb stomped somebody to death when he didn't have to. When he shot one of them who had a gun and was pointing it at him when they were trying to break into his house, the criminals, that was self-defense. But what he did later on was just cold-blooded murder. And I like the prison scenes. I know there's a lot of people who don't really care for the prison scenes because they think that it's stereotypical in some way because of the friend that he meets in the laundry room. But I actually really liked those scenes. And I know people find it to be unrealistic that he changes so much as a character over the span of 3 years. The guy got anally assaulted in a shower by people who he thought were his allies. He saw that they were hypocrites. They were preaching uh, white nationalism and neo-Nazi stuff, but they were making deals with the Mexicans or the Hispanics on the side for drugs. He saw that it was a bunch of bullshit, and he was already starting to poke holes in the rhetoric and everything prior to him having that moment in the shower. And then after that, he was completely broken down. And then he came across an old teacher of his who used to be a mentor of his, and Dr. Sweeney, who believed in him, who saw that he still had potential, saw that he still had hope to be rehabilitated, and he asked him for help. And the doctor gave it to him. And he saw African Americans in a different light like he once did. He saw that with Dr. Sweeney. He saw that with the friend that he made in the laundry room named Lamont. And he became a changed man. And I really love the dialogue when it comes to the scene between Derek and Dr. Sweeney after he was assaulted in the shower. So Derek is at this really low point in his life, and everything is coming crashing down again all around him. And Sweeney comes in, and he really brings perspective back to him at the moment that he absolutely needed it the most, with these really poignant words. Has anything you've done made your life better? Hate is baggage. Life's too short to be pissed off all the time. And I just felt like those words in particular, they really ring true in a multitude of different ways. And after Derek gets out of prison and he's trying to get his brother out of this world of the neo-Nazis, pull him away from Cameron, the film definitely starts to kind of go into a different sort of direction. And it almost feels like there's more that could have been done here. Because yeah, you get some great exchanges between Derek and Cameron where he's calling out Cameron and telling him, "You stay away from my brother or I'll rip your heart out." And there's the moment when he's trying to get his girlfriend to run away with him and leave the neo-Nazis in Stacy, but she's too wrapped up in it, and she just sees him as a traitor now and even calls him the N-word. I really like the addition of Stacy, by the way, because it shows that neo-Nazis, it's not just a male thing. Like there are women who hate just as much as the men. And he gets his a brother away from there in a very tense scene, and there's a great moment between him between the two brothers, between Derek and Danny, where they have this heart to heart with one another, where I believe this is really the moment. This is the turning point for Danny in his life, where Derek is finally able to really get through to him about how it's all bullshit. And it's not real. Like, it's all bullshit, man. Like, why do you want to go around hating all the time? And he gets through to him when it comes to how destructive and how dangerous and how pointless being a neo-Nazi and being a white nationalist and hating people for reasons that are just simply due to the color of their skin. And he and his brother go home and they work together to take down all the Nazi paraphernalia and all the posters and all the other stuff out of Danny's room. He finishes his paper, and you get a sense of overwhelming dread at this point anyway. Like, you get a sense that something bad is going to happen. Either Danny's going to die, Derek's going to die, or both. because now they're targeted by the neo-Nazis. But it ultimately turns out in a way that isn't exactly what you would expect. But when you think about it, it makes it makes tragic sense. It really does. Because what happens at the end of the movie is Danny gets gunned down by an African American, a gang member. I believe I've heard different things. I've heard that the gang member who shot him was this what was related to one of the gang members who got killed by Derek the night when Derek went to prison. But I'm not entirely sure about that, because there are some scenes that were featured in the work print that show that he was just one of the members of the gangs that took over or started really messing with the uh, idealized vision of what Danny and other people thought that Venice Beach was. And that definitely adds some context that I really feel should have been kept in the final cut. There's also more that Danny does in the work print that is more explicitly racist when it comes to the way that he treats this kid. So without that, it just seems like there's not really much of a reason at all for this African American boy to retaliate the way that he does. So it kind of makes the ending, when you think about it, feel a little forced because of the fact that it doesn't really seem like there is much of a motive. Oh, we blew smoke in his face. Like, all right. But I know that's kind of what the point is trying to show that hate is a cycle and it really doesn't discriminate. Like, it's not just white people hating black people, it's black people hating white people, or black people hating other black people, or white people hating other white people, or people hating other people of different races or creeds or beliefs or sexual orientation. It shows that it really is something that's a cycle, and it hates without discrimination. So I think that the thought process is there, but because of the lack of context, it doesn't really work as well as it could. Also, you have the whole setup where Derek is now being asked by the police to go undercover and infiltrate the neo-Nazi group in Venice Beach and put a stop to them and honestly have them face justice. And that's a really good idea. It's a really good concept. And you never see that happen. So that is something that I feel would have been nice to have seen. But I can see why the film doesn't go there. But it just brings it up, and then you don't really ever see a resolution to it. You don't see what happens with that. It didn't even have to be that very long of a scene. It could have been like something that happens after the end credits or during the end credits, in terms of what happened to Cameron and what happened to the group of neo-Nazis in Venice Beach. But you don't actually get that, though. That's not what happens. So the ending, while it is powerful, it does leave a pretty significant impression because of, just how cold and how just ruthless the message is. I do feel there's some more that could have been done with the conclusion to this story. But what they ultimately went with is a lot better than the original ending, which apparently was after Danny's death. Derek just went back to his old ways, shaved his head, and it just was essentially throwing away all of the effort and all of the goodwill and all of the rehabilitation that Derek successfully was able to do with his life down the drain. So I am really glad that it didn't go with that ending because that really would have sucked. So yeah, it's just one of those screenplays that I think there's a lot of strong things about it, a lot of great things about it. I like the nonlinear structure. There's things that are brought up though that I would have liked to have seen expanded upon more. Could have used some more context for certain things, but I can't deny its power. Like it's a story that definitely does stick with you. Um, it's one of the best films to me to show racism in all of its forms and how it comes from all different types of people, and it's not just one side over the other, and how it's a cycle, and how it can be learned, or how it can be something that people are born into, and how it's not just a simple case of racist people are just born evil, that there's much more nuance to it than that. Now, the film definitely would not be as good as it is, in my opinion, without its cast. I mean, Edward Norton was excellent as Derek. This is easily one of his best performances as an actor. He plays like four different roles in this. He plays the Derek who is young and full of hope and bright and passionate with his views, but he's not dangerous with them. Then he plays the Derek who's depressed and angry and isolated after the death of his father. Then he plays the Derek who becomes a major figure in the neo-Nazi community in Venice Beach and becomes this larger than life uh, neo-Nazi who's curb stomping people and making all these hateful speeches. And then he also effectively portrays the reformed Derek, who has learned to shy away from his racist rhetoric, to turn his back on his neo Nazism and choose a different path in life. So it's just a tour de force of a performance by Edward Norton. Edward Furlong, I think he does a good job. I do agree that his narration isn't the best though, but I think when it comes to the scenes where he's not narrating, I think it was definitely a solid performance. I don't think he really needed a different actor. I feel Edward did a really good job playing Danny. I felt he was able to show all the different nuances and layers of his character well, and he had some really good chemistry and a good dynamic overall with Edward Norton. It was really a genuine surprise to see Beverly D'Angelo playing such a serious role as Doris, Derek and Danny's mother, but it shows her range as an actress. She was incredible in this. Jennifer Lien was also really good as Davina. Ethan Suplee as Derek's friend, one of the members of the neo-Nazi group in Venice Beach. He played a great, just scumbag. It's a fat piece of shit, but it was a very believable and strong performance. Same thing goes for Fairuza Balk as Stacy. Um, I definitely feel it's one of her best performances. Shows her range as an actress. Avery Brooks, he was amazing in this as Sweeney, and this was a really great and standout performance by him. It shows that he was much more than just Cisco from Deep Space Nine or A Man Called Hawk. Like he had more that he could offer to the screen when it comes to his dramatic work. Elliot Gould was great in the role that he had as Murray, the teacher who got completely verbally uh, destroyed and annihilated and by Derek in that dinner table scene. Stacy Keach is just really a total pile of scum. Just an absolute piece of scum as Cameron Alexander, and he just does a really good job playing that role. The kind of guy who he just exudes manipulative energy. And you also have William Russ, who plays Dennis, Derek and Danny's father, in a good short but strong role. And you have some other actors and actresses as well. I definitely want to mention Guy Torry as Lamont, because I thought he was definitely another standout when it comes to the cast. And then you have some other aspects of the film that are all right, or actually pretty solid too, like the cinematography that Kaye also did, or the editing by Jerry Greenberg and Alan Hyme, or the sound editing. I want to give that some credit because you have that curb stomp scene, which, by the way, isn't as violent as people make it out to be. The whole film really isn't, other than like the scene at the end when Danny gets shot. Like it's not a very bloody movie. Even the curb stomp scene isn't that bloody, isn't that gory. It doesn't show that much. But the sound of the teeth on the curb, man, that is something that just sends chills down your spine every time you hear it. And speaking of the music, like I want to give credit to Ann Dudley. I really thought this was a genuinely amazing score. It was unique. It was interesting. It was a score that definitely had a lot of layers to it and really enhanced a lot of the emotion in a variety of different scenes throughout the film. And I think it's paced decently enough. There are some moments where I can say that it kind of drags a little, but not too much. So yeah, I would say that this was definitely, in my opinion, a good movie. But it's a film that I think there are some things about it that could have been done better. But overall, uh, I would say it's one of the better films that I've seen that deal with the subject matter that American History X deals with. So it's a film that I think if you can handle it, I highly recommend it. But that's just my thoughts on American History X. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.